This is where we take the source materials you share with us. Could be articles, notes, even personal reflections like today's, and we really get into them to pull out the key insights for you.
Basically, we do the digging so you get the core takeaways.
Exactly. And today, it's quite personal. We're looking at sources from a listener, some reflective writing, and there's also a short video clip.
Right, and these aren't, academic studies. This is raw experience. It centers on a parent at a really pivotal moment.
Yeah, giving advice to their child, Kwamev, who's just about to leave for a hostel. It's a very specific family moment, but the feelings, the themes, they're pretty universal, I think.
Absolutely. The sources peel back the layers,
Yeah.
You see the parent's own internal struggle. Say, I say something, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
Then the advice itself, how the child reacts.
And it doesn't stop there, does it?
No, it spirals out into these bigger questions, like what does success or being great really mean?
Yeah.
It's just money. And where does happiness fit in, especially with, modern life, technology, all that pressure?
Okay. So our mission here is to unpack all of that. The emotion, the philosophy hidden in this everyday moment. We want to understand the parent's viewpoint, feel that tension, and see what it reveals about, parenting, communication, and that huge question, what makes a good life?
Sounds good. Let's dive in.
Okay.
So the written source starts with the parent driving, and they're really caught up in this dilemma. They've apparently been thinking about giving this advice for a whole year.
A year? Wow, just turning it over in their mind. Why the hesitation? What was holding them back?
Fear, plain and simple. The source mentions a fear of rejection. What if my child just dismisses my thoughts? Or worse.
Worse how?
That it could actually damage the relationship, reduce communication, lessen the affection. The source uses this phrase, the stream of love, fearing it might shrink or dry up.
Wow, stream of love. That's quite potent, isn't it? The idea that advice, even well-intentioned, could actually diminish love.
Exactly, and there's this added layer where the parent feels like maybe giving preachy advice just doesn't work anymore.
Why not?
They connect it to the modern world, specifically mentioning uncontrolled mobile use. The idea seems to be that maybe it's dulled our capacity for wisdom, for really taking things in. So the advice feels risky emotionally and maybe pointless practically.
Which makes the decision to speak or not speak feel incredibly heavy. And the source actually labels this moment, doesn't it?
It does. It calls it the moment of truth.
Okay, what does that mean in this context?
Well, the source defines it as like a critical point, a moment that demands a decision, or maybe it's a test, something with real consequences that leaves a lasting mark. The parent sees this whole goodbye interaction as one of those moments.
So the stakes feel really high for the parent. But despite all that fear, that year of deliberation, they do speak.
Yes. The decision is made, and it happens, like you said, right at the very last second.
Yeah.
As they're literally saying goodbye at the hostel gate.
Cutting it fine.
Yeah.
So what was said in that moment of truth? What was the core message?
It was pretty concise, actually. They said to Tevamev, if you study during study time, a person becomes great.
Yeah.
Just that.
Becomes great. Okay. And the source notes something interesting about the examples they used, or almost used.
Right. They thought about mentioning famous historical figures, Talak, Agarkar, people like that.
The standard role model stuff.
Yeah, but they didn't. Instead, they used examples from within their own family. Ashish Kaka, Satyan Kaka, even the parent themselves, Pravin Mankar, who's named in the video title.
That feels significant. Why do you think they did that?
It feels very intentional, like they wanted tangible proof. Not distant heroes, but people Trevemev actually knows, like saying, look, this isn't some abstract idea. It worked for people right here in our family. More relatable, maybe.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm. And after delivering this message, this culmination of a year's anxiety, how did the parent feel? Relief.
Huge relief, yeah. Source says they felt free from responsibility, like their mind just went empty. They use the phrase, spill their moments of truth.
Spilled them out. Like letting go of a burden.
Exactly.
Okay, but then there's the immediate reaction, the other side of the conversation. What did Trevemev say or do right after hearing this big piece of advice?
Well, according to the sources.
Yeah.
Just 3 words.
Watchword.
Baba boring.
Oh, ouch. After all that internal buildup, Baba boring. That's stark.
It really is. Kind of captures that potential gap between generations, maybe. And then the separation happens fast. The source mentions a rector blew the whistle.
Right.
And Trevemev just slipped away into the hostel. Gone. Into his new life.
Yeah, a separate world now, hostel, studies, new friends, and the parent is left with the drive home. How was that?
The source describes it as silent. The parent, the grandmother Ulka, the mother Dipali.
Right.
Just quiet in the car. The parents wondering what the others are thinking, how they saw that goodbye. Seems like everyone was processing it differently.
And it turns out the parent wasn't the only one dishing out advice at the end, right?
Yeah, the others chimed in too. Both Ulka and Dipali told Trivamef to study hard. The parent sees this as basically the same message: become big, become great.
So a shared hope from the family.
A shared hope, yeah. But the parent's reflection adds this layer of anxiety, I guess. They acknowledge how tough life is, how competitive. There's mention of the potential for terrible defeat, even if you try your best, and worries about the job market later on.
So even as they're saying study hard, there's this undercurrent of, God, I hope it's enough in this world.
Exactly. But amidst all that, there's one detail the parent notes as a positive.
What's that?
The hostel doesn't allow mobile phones. The parent sees this as good discipline, and they observe that Travov seems okay, he's composed himself, and this apparently brings the family peace of mind at home. The source adds, this much is also not little, finding value in that small assurance.
That's actually a really poignant point, finding comfort in the small things when the big picture feels uncertain. But this core advice study to become great, it really forces the question the source then dives into. What does great actually mean to people?
And the source doesn't pull any punches. It says the common understanding, the sort of bitter truth, as it calls it, is that becoming great equals earning money.
Just money.
Pretty much presented that way.
Yeah.
As like the necessary ingredient for happy living today.
And to illustrate this, the source uses some really specific, almost startling examples, doesn't it?
Throws out things like a future Apple 25 phone costing, what, 250,000 rupees?
Yeah, and even a simple coffee at CCD being 255 rupees plus tax. These huge numbers.
Right, and then it contrasts that immediately with a typical monthly salary, say 50,000 rupees. The source just states, huge difference, and asks, if you buy the fancy phone, what are you going to eat? It frames financial pressure as a direct source of unhappiness.
Okay, so the logic presented is greatness, money, and lack of money, unhappiness. But does the source then say lots of money, lots of happiness?
No, it questions that directly. It includes this observation, that would be anecdotal, that sometimes rich people seem less happy while you might see poorer people who seem quite content. It challenges that simple equation.
And it suggests that the constant chase for money might even be detrimental.
Yeah, it flips this idea that maybe just continuously earning money puts you in a kind of daze, or it causes mental or physical lethargy, like you're just numbly going through the motions of earning.
So caught up in the chase, you don't even notice if you're happy or not.
Or maybe, as the source suggests, many people haven't even figured out what their own happiness looks like. They haven't stopped to ask themselves because they're so busy trying to make ends meet or climb that ladder.
Which brings up a really tough point the source raises. Okay, if you're supposed to seek happiness, how can you even start doing that if your entire life, all your energy is just consumed by basic survival, just, getting food on the table?
It does feel like a bit of a catch-22, doesn't it? The pressure to earn might block the very path to finding what makes you happy beyond earning.
But the source doesn't just leave it there as an impossible problem. It does offer some ideas for finding happiness, even within constraints.
Yes, it does. It suggests things like engaging with different arts, listening to music, reading, getting out into nature. Things that maybe don't require vast wealth, but perhaps require time, attention.
Yeah, mental space. And then there's this sudden shift in the writing, back to the really mundane.
Right, describing the daily grind, buying vegetables, preparing roti, eating, over and over. And this thought pops up, are we living just to eat? It feels almost bleak.
But then something unexpected happens right after that thought.
Yes. The parent describes suddenly bursting out laughing. Right there, while thinking about the potential meaninglessness of the daily food routine.
That's quite a reaction, finding humor in the existential dread.
Maybe, or just the absurdity of it. The parent literally describes it as having found happiness in that unexpected moment of laughter.
And someone asks why they're laughing.
Dipali, the mother, asks, and the parent gives this slightly rambling answer, connecting it back to time passing and Trivamef graduating eventually. It's a bit hard to follow, honestly, but it shows how tangled these thoughts are. The mundane, the child's future, a sudden spark of joy.
And this wasn't the only time they laughed like that.
No, the source mentions another instance, again, triggered by contemplating the boring daily schedule. Yoga, tea, food, nap, boredom, food, sleep. Just laughing again.
And this time,
nobody asks why. Which leads the parent to wonder, in the text, if people just thought they were a bit mad, laughing alone at the routine. A little isolating, perhaps.
Yeah. And there's one other quick glimpse of happiness mentioned, isn't there? Something about a car?
Oh, right. Seeing a Thar car flying away after overtaking. The source just notes, the Thar car. This too is happiness, folks.
So happiness isn't just in the arts or nature, but it can be these tiny, fleeting, maybe even slightly strange moments. A car speeding off. A sudden laugh.
Exactly. It paints a picture of happiness as something complex, maybe unpredictable, found alongside the big anxieties and the everyday boredom.
Okay, let's pull this back to you, the listener, engaging with this deep dive. We've tracked this parent's journey, the fear, the moment of truth, the child's reaction, the family dynamics, and then these really big questions about what we're all striving for.
Yeah, as you're listening to this, how does it land with you? Do you recognize that struggle? Giving advice, receiving advice, especially within families, that fear the parent felt, or maybe the child's reaction.
And what about this idea of greatness or success? What does that mean to you personally? Is it tightly bound to income, like the source suggests is common, or have you carved out a different definition for yourself?
Where do you find your happiness? Amidst the daily routines, the pressures you face, are there specific things, like the arts or nature the source mentioned? Or is it more like those unexpected moments of laughter or seeing a cool car? Do you actively look for joy?
And one last thing, thinking about that parent's comment on uncontrolled mobile use and information overload. How do you think our current digital world impacts these fundamental things? How we give and receive heartfelt advice? How we even think about success or happiness when there are so many messages coming at us? Does that fear of being boring, like Pravin Mankar said, influence how we connect?
It's quite a journey we've taken through these sources, isn't it? Started with a parent's quiet anxiety in a car, that very specific moment of deciding whether to speak.
Yeah, and it unfolded through the goodbye, the slightly awkward interaction, and then opened up these huge, timeless questions about money, meaning, competition, and where we actually find joy in the day-to-day.
And while these are reflections from one specific family, they really do touch on things most of us grapple with. That vulnerability in trying to connect, the pressure to achieve something, the search for meaning when life feels like just routine. So maybe a final thought to leave you with. Considering everything we've unpacked, the parent's intense fear, the child's quick dismissal, society's strong link between money and greatness, and the really personal, sometimes random nature of happiness. When we gather the courage to speak our own moments of truth, the things we deeply believe and want to pass on, who are we really